War doesn't begin with gunshots. It begins long before that, when the sound of the wind seems heavier than the conversations in the streets, when the neighbors stop waving and the windows close earlier, when fear seeps in through the cracks and changes the tone of voices. It was in this kind of silence that Lukas Meyer's story began. He lived in Velograd, a small town in Eastern Europe, surrounded by hills, fields, and a river that cut through the valley like a silver line. Velograd was the kind of place that didn't appear on maps, but it was home to hundreds of families who believed the outside world would never reach them. Lukas was a bus driver. He knew every bend in the road, every face that climbed the worn metal steps. He greeted everyone with the same calm smile. He was a man of simple gestures, one of those who get up early and come home late, but always with something good to say. In the city, they said he was the kind of person who made the day seem lighter. Elena, his wife, worked as a seamstress. She would spend hours at the window, sewing colorful fabrics that contrasted with the gray of the walls. She was a woman of few words, but with a strong presence. And then there was Mira, their daughter, an 8-year-old girl, curious and dreamy. I liked to draw the sky. I always asked my father, "What's the sea like, Dad?" And he would answer, "The sea is like the wind, daughter, except it sings." Their routine continued at a leisurely pace, as if time had forgotten to pass by them. Until one day, the radio brought a different kind of news. The northern borders were tense. Armed groups were advancing on neighboring cities. Residents began stockpiling food, hiding documents, and locking their doors in fear. But Lukas believed that it would never reach Velograd. "This too shall pass," he said, and for a while, it really did pass. But fear is patient. He is waiting, and when it arrives, it comes without warning. It was dawn when the first rumble echoed. A flash of light illuminated the sky, followed by another, and then another. The windows shook. The dogs started barking. The sound of the explosions mingled with the cries of children and the shouts of adults trying to understand what was happening. Within minutes, the city's calm was replaced by chaos. Lukas woke up to the noise and ran to the window. From the top of the hill, he saw columns of smoke rising in the distance. The city center was on fire. She ran to Mira's room, picked the girl up in her arms, and called Elena. "We have to leave. Now." Elena was still trying to understand what was happening when a new bang shook the walls. The window glass broke. The icy wind tore through the silence. They put on what they could find, grabbed a suitcase with clothes, some documents, and the silver necklace that had belonged to Lukas's mother. Outside, neighbors ran through the streets, some in despair, others aimlessly. Cars were burning. The sound of sirens mingled with crying and running. War had finally reached Velograd. Lukas, with his daughter on his shoulders and his suitcase in hand, crossed the main square. The old bus stop, which for years had been a symbol of normalcy, was now empty. The same bench where he waited for his morning shift was covered in ashes. He looked back one last time at the house where he had built his life and knew that he might never return. During the following days, the family wandered aimlessly. Along with hundreds of other refugees, they traveled along snow-covered roads in search of safety. They crossed open fields, destroyed villages, and makeshift bridges over frozen rivers. Each step was a mixture of faith and exhaustion. The wind cut his face like a razor. The wet clothes clung to the skin, but Lukas didn't stop. She would carry her daughter on her back when she could no longer walk. He shared his bread with strangers, and even amidst the horror, she still tried to smile. On the third day, they arrived at a village called Strazov near the western border. It was the last stop before crossing into safe territory. There, volunteers and soldiers helped women and children cross the street. The place was packed. Makeshift tents were piled up, and the cold seemed to penetrate to the bone. It was there that Lukas made the decision that would change the family's destiny. Elena wanted to move on. She knew the worst was yet to come. But Lukas looked around and saw the despair on the faces of the others. Injured people, abandoned elderly people, children without parents. His conscience wouldn't allow him to simply turn his back on him. "You'll cross first," he said firmly. "I'll follow up later." Elena hesitated. "No, let's go together. We can't be separated." But Lukas replied, "If everyone only thinks about their own family, no one will survive." Elena was crying. Mira, clinging to her father's leg, asked, "Do you promise you'll come, Dad?" He bent down, looked into her eyes, and said, "I promise. And when I arrive, you'll show me the sea." He kissed her forehead and handed the purse to his wife. Then he turned around and walked back towards the village. That was the last time they saw him. The wind was blowing harder that day. On the other side of the border, Elena and Mira were met by foreign soldiers. They were taken to a makeshift shelter inside an abandoned school. The windows were broken and the cold was coming in from all sides. But even so, there was security. There was silence. It was the first time the sound of bombs couldn't be heard. Elena hugged her daughter and cried for the first time since leaving Velograd. Mira slept, exhausted, without understanding what was happening. She still believed that her father would come looking for them soon. Every engine sound made the girl run to the door. "Is it him?" he asked, but it never was. In the following days, Elena searched for news of Lukas. He asked the soldiers, the volunteers, everyone who passed by the aid station, but nobody knew anything. Some said he had been seen helping wounded people in a nearby town. Others claimed that he might have been captured. But they were just rumors, spread out of desperation. Time passed, and weeks turned into months. The war continued. Thousands of people disappeared every day, and their names were lost in the endless lists of the Red Cross. Lukas Meyer's name never appeared in any of them. Life in the shelter was filled with waiting. The women shared bread and stories. Some wept for their dead husbands, others clung to any sign of hope. Elena watched everything in silence. She didn't say her husband was dead, she only said he was still on his way. It was their way of surviving. At night, after the lights were turned off, she wrote letters. Letters that always began the same way. "Lukas, if you're still somewhere, ... double quotes, and they always ended with the same phrase. Know that Mira and I are still waiting for you." She never had the courage to send any. He kept them all in a small wooden box. It was as if each letter was a reminder that he still existed. Mira grew up surrounded by memories. The other children were talking about toys, school, and Christmas. She was talking about her father. He said that he was a driver, that he had big hands and a calm smile. He spoke of him as if he were a hero from ancient stories. And every night, before going to sleep, she would ask God that the wind would carry her voice to him. Time went on. The war is over. But her trail remained. Entire cities were destroyed. Thousands of bodies were never found. And among the living, longing has become a way of continuing to breathe. 5 years have passed since the last day Lukas was seen. Elena and Mira already lived in a small apartment in a German city. Life seemed to go on, but something within them had stopped in time. The radio no longer talked about war, but about reconstruction. Still, the past wouldn't leave his memory. One morning, while cleaning out an old drawer, Elena found a folded newspaper. It was an international edition, featuring an article about a humanitarian convoy operating in devastated areas of Eastern Europe. Among the photos was a blurry image of a tall, bearded man helping to carry boxes of supplies. The caption read, "Anonymous volunteers help war survivors." She stared for a long time. The features were too familiar. His hands, his posture, even the way he tilted his head. It looked like Lukas. She showed the photo to her daughter, who was already 13 years old. "It's him, Mom, I know it's him." Elena did not respond. He put the newspaper away with the letters and closed the box. That night, she lit a candle in the window, something she hadn't done in years. That was the sign. The same one she had promised to use if he ever needed to find them. In the following months, more reports emerged. A reporter mentioned a volunteer driver known only as the driver. It was said that he would appear in high-risk areas, help the wounded, and then disappear. Nobody knew who he was or where he came from. Some said he was a former soldier. Others that he was a father who had lost his family in the war. For Elena, one possibility was enough. She began to believe that Lukas was alive, that perhaps, for some reason, he couldn't come back. But believing is different from knowing, and doubt is a silent prison. Years have passed. Mira grew into a teenager, and over time, the memory of her father became something between a dream and a memory. She said that sometimes she dreamed about him driving a bus down a snow-covered road. In the dream, he waved, but the sound of the engine drowned out any words. She would wake up crying, with the feeling that he was nearby, but untouchable, like a shadow. In 2002, 9 years after her disappearance, Mira visited an exhibition in Berlin called Faces of War. The exhibition featured photographs of refugees, doctors, and volunteers. And it was there, among the pictures, that she found him. In one of the photographs taken on the Serbian border, there was a man in the background. His face was partially obscured by shadow, but his eyes were unmistakable. The same serene gaze, the same gentle smile, and hanging around her neck, a silver necklace. The family necklace. She froze. For a moment, the noise from the gallery disappeared. Everything around disappeared, and only that image remained. It felt like being in the presence of a breathing ghost. She called the exhibition curator and asked for information about the photo, but he knew very little. The image had been sent by a freelance photographer who worked in conflict zones. His name was Milan Kovacs. The photo was taken in 1998 in a destroyed village near the border. According to the photographer, the man in the photo was helping to distribute food and remove the wounded, but he disappeared 2 days later. The caption for the image simply read, "Hope, even when the world falls apart." Mira left the exhibition with trembling hands. For years, his father had been just a memory, an old photograph kept in a drawer. But now he had returned to existence, even if only as a distant image on a cold wall. That rekindled something she thought she had lost: hope. In the following days, she couldn't think of anything else. He printed the photo, enlarged it, and examined every detail. The way he held the box, the way he tilted his gaze towards the ground, the silver necklace, reflecting the light. Everything about her screamed that she was Lukas. And if that were true, where would he be now? Elena tried to calm her down. He said that perhaps he was just a similar-looking man, and that it wasn't worth reopening old wounds. But for Mira, pretending was impossible. What if it's him? What if he's still alive? That night, she stayed up late, gazing at her father's portrait on the table. The clock struck 2 in the morning when she decided, I would go look for him. It didn't matter the time or the place, I needed to know. The following days were spent in preparation. She researched everything about the photographer Milan Kovacs. She discovered that he worked for a humanitarian organization and spent his time traveling between refugee camps. He found an old email address on a forum for independent journalists and wrote a long message explaining who he was and why he was contacting them. For weeks, no response. Until one day the notification arrived. The answer was short. The photographer confirmed that he remembered the photo. He said that the man depicted had appeared in a village Kolegulov near the destroyed border. He helped volunteers and transported injured people in a white truck. He spoke little, but always smiled, and he disappeared after an ambush. I don't know who he was, Milan wrote, but I remember his eyes well. I've never seen anything like it in a war zone. Those words were enough. Mira knew she needed to go there. Elena tried to stop it. He said it was dangerous, that the war had left ruins, mines, and ghosts. But the daughter had already decided, I don't care if he's alive or dead. I just want to know the truth. A few weeks later, Mira left. She carried with her a small backpack, the enlarged photograph, and the silver necklace that had belonged to her mother. The trip to Zalov took 2 days. The train crossed empty fields and silent cities, marked by years of destruction. In the windows, the reflection showed her face blended with the landscape. It was as if the past were observing the present. When he arrived, he found a place frozen in time. Abandoned houses, dust-covered streets, and a dense, almost sacred silence. The few people who still lived there looked like ghosts walking among the ruins. Mira showed the photo to the first resident she encountered. The man looked for a long time and said, yes, he was here. He helped carry the wounded to the truck. He slept in the barn next to the church. She went there. The barn was in ruins. On the ground, remnants of boxes and pieces of wood. Among the rubble, he found an old can with burnt papers inside. Inside it, something unexpected. A torn photograph. It showed a group of volunteers in front of a white truck. And there he was, Lukas. Her heart raced. The necklace was still hanging around his neck. Behind the photo, a nearly faded note, wherever there is still life. Mira sat on the floor and cried. Not out of sadness, but out of confirmation. He had actually been there. I'm alive, helping, and once again, disappearing. In the following days, she toured the surrounding area, talking to residents, former soldiers, and volunteers. Each person seemed to remember a different fragment of the story. A man said that he slept very little, almost not at all. One woman stated that he helped lost children find their families. Another person said that he refused to carry weapons. He said he had already seen enough. The image that emerged was of a man who had become part of the conflict itself, not as a combatant, but as a bridge between the wreckage and survival. Mira began to understand that perhaps her father had chosen to disappear. Perhaps he wasn't driven by the war itself, but by the mission it imposed upon him. She stayed in Zelov for 3 weeks, recording each testimony, noting every detail. When she finally decided to return, she left flowers at the gate of the old church. There, facing the east wind, he whispered, "If you're still somewhere, I found your way." Back in Germany, Alina listened to everything in silence. He looked at the new photos, the reports, the image of the white truck. For a moment, her face lit up, as if a part of her dormant hope had awakened. But soon after, her eyes filled with tears. If he was alive, why didn't he come back? Mira did not respond. Perhaps the answer lay in the father's own silence. That same day, she wrote in her diary, perhaps he understood. Something that we still don't. That sometimes living is about getting lost while helping others find themselves. Over time, the clues began to fade. The people who remembered him died, the documents disappeared, and the traces faded with the years. But Lukas's story continued to live on, in voices, in memories, and now in the pages of his daughter's diary. She began studying photography, driven by the desire to record what time insists on erasing. I once said to a teacher, my father disappeared. So I learned how to search. Time went on its course, indifferent. The seasons changed, the cities were rebuilt, and the war became just a chapter in history books. But for Elena and Mira, the past never truly ended. He remained at the table amidst the interrupted conversations and the memories that the silence insisted on protecting. Mira was already 22 years old when she decided to transform emptiness into purpose. She enrolled in a photography college driven by the idea of capturing what time usually erases. I didn't just want pretty pictures, I wanted memories. I wanted to find, through the lenses, what fate had stolen. In the beginning, I photographed ordinary people, calloused hands, weathered faces, the gaze of those who had lived more than they should have. Over time, he began to travel, documenting stories of war and reconstruction. He said he needed to understand what his father had seen. Each face photographed was, in some way, an attempt to find him again. The exhibitions he held attracted attention for their sensitivity and melancholy. People saw pain in the images. She saw hope. Each photograph is a testimony, he said, and bearing witness is a way to prevent people from disappearing. It was during one of these trips, in 2004, that Mira received unexpected news. A colleague from the press reported that the Red Cross had published a list of volunteers who went missing during an attack on a medical convoy on the eastern border. Among the names was L. Meyer. For a moment, she thought it was a coincidence, but the heart did not believe it. He rushed to the organization's office in Berlin and asked to see the files. Information was scarce. A destroyed humanitarian truck, few survivors, no bodies identified. The record only mentioned L. Meyer, driver. Last sighting, VRSKA Road, June 3, 2004. And then, nothing. Another interrupted line amidst so many others. She stood before the screen, reading and rereading the same words, as if each one could change meaning over time. Nothing has changed, but for the first time she felt peace. Not the peace of certainty, but the peace of someone who finally understands the weight of silence. He went back home and told his mother. Elena listened in silence, as she had done since day one. After a long time, he simply said, if he was there, it's because he still believed in something. That night, Mira opened the old wooden box. The letters, already yellowed, were still. Their reading each one was like traveling back in time. Lukas hadn't responded to any of them, but in a way, he was present in every line Elena had written. Those letters were the link between what was gone and what still remained. The following year, Mira began a personal project, photographing the marks left by war on people, not on cities. She traveled alone through former conflict zones, listening to stories and portraying survivors. Their faces were different, but they all carried the same absence. She said she photographed those who were waiting for someone. On one of his expeditions, he revisited Strazov, the village where his father had last been seen. The place was empty, the tents now covered in weeds. The river, calm, reflecting a gray sky. There she understood what her father had felt, The impulse to help, to stay, to not back down even when everything told us to flee. Back in Germany, he began putting together the script for a documentary. Not about Lukas Meyer, but about all those who had disappeared trying to save others. He called it Those Who Remained. For months, he revisited old records, listened to testimonies, cross-referenced data, and searched for forgotten photos. He discovered that there were dozens of similar stories, ordinary men and women who had chosen to remain amidst the chaos. She saw a fragment of her father in each of them. It was as if Lukas had multiplied himself with each act of anonymous courage. The documentary premiered in 2017 at a small humanitarian film festival. The room was almost full. When the lights went out, the screen showed images of war, children, trains, faces of nameless people. And then her voice began. Some men disappear because they want to escape. Others disappear because they choose to stay. My father didn't disappear. He simply crossed the border between fear and courage. As the narration continued, images of the white truck appeared. No one knew who had filmed that scene, but the video showed a man driving through the smoke, looking straight ahead, calm. There was no caption, just the image, and that was enough. When the film ended, the audience remained silent for long seconds. Then came the applause, a restrained, respectful applause, as if it were not just for the film, but for all those who were still waiting for answers. Mira did not go up on stage. She sat at the back of the room watching. I knew that this was not the end of the story, but the beginning of another. It is about keeping alive the memory of those who disappear without a trace, but who, in some way, continue to exist in the lives they touched. That night, when she got home, she lit a candle in the window, the same gesture her mother had made years before. And for the first time, she didn't cry. The flame flickered, reflecting in the glass the outline of her face and that of a man in the background. Perhaps it was just a shadow, or perhaps a presence. The invisible camera of the life documentary seemed to slowly move away, leaving the small house in the darkness. The narration continued. Love also leaves traces, even when the body is gone. Kindness continues to walk on. For those who wait, time never passes in the same way. For some, he is a silent enemy. For others, it's the only proof that they are still alive. For decades, Lukas Meyer's name was lost among incomplete records, fragmented testimonies, and confused memories. But somehow, his absence was never complete. She transformed into something bigger, a symbol, the story of an ordinary man who became part of what he tried to save. A driver who traded the comfort of his family for the unpredictable road of compassion. A father who disappeared, but who left behind the echo of kindness. Today, when former volunteers gather to reminisce about the warriors, his name still comes up from time to time. Some say they have seen him in other regions, helping in new humanitarian crises. Others believe he died in silence, never revealing who he was. There is no evidence to support either version. But for those who had heard of him, Lukas Meyer ceased to be a person. It became an idea that even in places where everything is falling apart, there can still be someone willing to lend a hand. In the Red Cross archives, there is a handwritten note next to his name. Last confirmed location, VRSKA Road. He was driving a truck carrying supplies. Witnesses recount attempts to rescue the wounded during an airstrike. The note ends with 2 words crossed out due to time and humidity, but still legible. He continued driving. Nobody knows who wrote this. Perhaps a soldier, perhaps a volunteer. But that sentence, continue driving, sums up what Lukas represented. While others stopped, he kept going. While fear froze hearts, he moved wheels. And that's how many prefer to remember him. Not as someone who disappeared, but as someone who simply didn't stop. Mira, now an adult, avoids talking about her father in public. She says that each person has their own way of dealing with the past, and hers is silence. But anyone who observes her notices, in her exhibitions, interviews, and photographs, his spirit is still there. The way she frames the gaze of those who suffer, the way she uses light to reveal dignity, even in pain, everything about her carries the same sense of humanity that guided Lukas on his journey. Once, during a conference on war photography, she was asked why she continued to visit conflict zones even after so many years. She replied calmly, "Because it is in the places where everything seems lost that human beings show." themselves to be most whole. And that's where I find my father. The audience fell silent. And perhaps it was in this silence that Lukas's story finally found rest. In the visual archives left by Mira, there is a series of images called invisible borders. These are portraits of people walking along deserted roads, some looking towards the horizon, others at the camera. In one of the photos, almost imperceptible, a white truck can be seen disappearing into the background of the landscape. Nobody knows where the photo was taken, nor who was driving the vehicle. But those who know the story say that that image is, in a way, Lukas Meyer's last photograph. Perhaps he never came back. Perhaps he chose to remain on routes where help was still needed. Or perhaps fate made him part of the road, invisible, yet present, guiding others to cross their own borders. The documentary concludes with the narrator's voice, firm and serene, in every war. There are those who fight, those who flee, and those who stay. Those who remain are not remembered for medals or monuments, but for the silent gestures that keep life possible. Lukas Meyer was one of those men. We don't know where he is, but we know what he left behind. Proof that courage is not made of weapons, but of choices. The music slowly builds. Images of snow-covered roads, abandoned trucks, and anonymous faces fill the screen. The narrator continues, "Perhaps the true end of a war lies not in the signing of a treaty, but in the ability of a single man to continue believing in peace, even when everything around him crumbles." The final image shows a candle flickering above a window. Outside, the wind blows, but it doesn't extinguish it. And then the final words, "He promised he would return," and somehow it worked out. Silence. Black screen. Credits are starting to rise. Among the names, a simple dedication to all those who disappeared while helping others to survive. And in the end, a phrase perhaps written by Mira, perhaps simply left by the wind. Love doesn't need to be seen to exist. Sometimes, he just keeps driving.